working on our general vertebral parts, our first structure is called the spinous process. And so this is the tip on the posterior side of the bone itself. And so when you feel your own vertebral column and you feel the bumps through the skin, you're feeling the spinous processes of your own vertebra. Transverse process is going to be sticking out laterally from the vertebra, and there'll be two on each vertebra. Each vertebra will also have a hole through the center of it called the vertebral foramen, and this is going to be where the spinal cord is able to run through the bone. The lamina are going to be the flat pieces of bone that are located between the transverse process on one side and the spinous process. Pedicles are going to be little short pieces of bone that connect the transverse processes, the lamina, the spinous process, all of those structures to the vertebral body or the centrum. And that's our next structure, vertebral body or centrum, which is just the main bony component of the vertebra itself. We also have a superior and inferior articulating process. So these are the bumps that will stick up on top and bottom. And so on top, they resemble almost like ears that are on an animal. So like so. And then on each one of the process, so the entire bump is the process, and sitting on each process is going to be a flat surface. And so this flat surface is what is going to be the facet. So the superior articulating facet are located on the superior articulating process, and the process is going to be the whole bump, whereas the facet is just the flat surface on the bump. And then inferior will be on the ones below. We're also going to have an intervertebral disc. So these are pieces of fibrocartilage that sit in between the bodies of each vertebra, and it prevents them from rubbing up on one another. And then our last one is called the intervertebral foramen. And so this is a natural hole that's created between two vertebrae as they come together. So as we take a look at pictures here, this is an inferior view. So we're looking from the bottom of a vertebra. And so here is that vertebral body or the centrum, just this main bony component. We also see the spinous process, which is going to be this big bump right here on the posterior side. We see the transverse process sticking out on each side. And so lamina we can't see quite well yet until our next picture, but it's going to be in between the transverse process and the spinous process. So it's just going to be the flat bone. And so it's going to resemble almost like the face of an animal. That will be the lamina. But we can see the pedicles really well from this view right here. So the pedicle is just going to be this narrow piece of bone right there that connects all that stuff we just talked about, the spinous process, the lamina, and the transverse processes, this whole thing to the bone itself. And there's two of them. There's one on each side. So these are the pedicles, just like so. And then we can see the inferior articulating process. So that's this whole bump that's sticking out. And then the facet is just the flat surface on the bump. And so as we take a look here, we can see a little more of these structures better here. So the superior articulating process is going to be this whole bump that's sticking upward. That whole bump is the superior articulating process. And then the flat surface that sits on the bump is going to be the superior articulating facet. Just like so, that smooth, flat surface on the bump itself. That is the superior articulating facet. And you can see on the other side the same thing. The superior articulating process is the bump, and then the flat surface is going to be the superior articulating facet.